first question for all of you is, if your AI journey to date was a movie, what would the title be? And what was the real world problem that pushed you to create an agent?
Well, I guess I've got the
You
mic,
go,
so
you go first, Andy.
I did pre-prepare some of these, and I got some assistance. So for the PCO, we produce legislation, of course. So the last consolidation, a question of authority, the semantic divide. All the versions we leave behind. And my favourite, the fragment strikes back. And that speaks a little bit to, how we approach this. This was a year ago when we started this, and we didn't know what we didn't know. And so really the effort at that time was to get moving, to get started with something, to figure out how are we going to work in this space. And one of the things that really came out of that is that in terms of the production of legislation, we're very much anchored currently into a document-centric world that came from legislation and statute books. And for this new era, we really needed to look at how we structure and organise our legislation differently into fragments. And perhaps I'll leave it there. More to say.
Thanks. Jo?
I did ask my question this team. I'm not sure if I liked the answers. I think they might have used ChatGPT. But they did say that if it was a title of a movie, it would be The Fast and Furious Regulator. But I did ask also, some of them came back and said that if it was an existing movie today, it would be Indiana Jones. And Indiana Jones, Raiders of the Lost Ark, because we were constantly learning, lots of puzzles to solve, sometimes felt trapped in the maze while we were doing the work, but we got there in the end. So the big real world problem that we were trying to solve was our regulatory system was under significant pressure. We had a growing backlog of applications to undertake activity on dockland. A number of those applications had the potential to unlock significant economic value for New Zealand, and we were under significant pressure from both our ministers and the public to do better because of the length of time it was taking to process the applications. So the big focus around the tool that you saw, some of what we did was how do we speed up and support regulatory decision making, not replace regulatory judgement, but actually support it so that we could make faster, better decisions.
Kia ora koutou, ngā mihi. I think we talked about this, and I did kind of start with True Lies, if it was a bit of a bit of a drama, because I think some of the things that came out, we really learned all about some of the hallucinations in the work that we were doing, so that was really interesting. But in the end, we went for a bit of a documentary theme around pilot to proof, and I think that's really, as we started to find out a little bit more about it and how things worked, we got that proof of concept, which was really what we were after. I guess the main problem that we were looking to solve, the Education Review Office does bucket loads of reports, hundreds of schools, thousands of early learning services and then national reviews every year. And we were like, well, that's a lot of stuff we could do something with, but we're a pretty small agency. We tried a whole lot of things and to manually just analyse those reports to get system insights and then individual provider insights was just impossible. We tried things like WordStat and other things. It just didn't work for us. So we partnered with the lovely FinTam, and we just trialled really a small prototype. What we wanted to know was, could we use this unstructured data in a really useful way? So we started small, which was just with some of our school reviews using public information, things that were publicly found, and then we just looked at what our recommended actions were and our improvement actions, and we wanted to know, did schools use them? Were they useful? Did they put them in their plans? And so that was really the key element that we had here, and it just meant that it was a really scalable, useful way of being able to get across over time as we build this out, hundreds of schools and reports, and use those insights both operationally and strategically.
Brilliant, thank you. Raewyn. Okay, and for me, well, it's actually the Lego movie, and I use my trusty friend co-pilot, sorry, Vintan, to help with that. And really what that's about, I mean, we built iteratively, we encouraged experimentation, and it's about sort of just empowering everyday innovators and just being innovative, just try it and have a go, and build it out from there. So it works. So one of the functions at WorkSafe that I manage is our guidance products area. We have 440 guidance products, a number of which need updating, or most of which need updating. We've also got an Amendment Act to the Health and Safety at Work Act, which is going through select committee process now. There's a number of changes to sort of key concepts in that, which is, on the day that that's enacted, our 440 guidance products in effect become out of date. And so we've been exploring, what are the ways that we can update that guidance more quickly, and how can we tackle that. Doing this sort of the manual way that we would have in the past, we'll just never get there in the time that we need. So we've sort of built two agents. One is a currency agent that looks at how we update our guidance, and then the other one is very similar, sort of feedback type process, submissions process, very similar to the one that Fintan showed you in the video.
Alrighty, so I'm going to have to be selective in my questions with our available time. But Andy, you at PCO, you did something quite interesting in that you actually, I believe, worked with maybe 5 different providers on 5 different POCs at the same time, or in a short period of time. But then you also have been quite transparent about how you shared what happened through that process. So I just wondered if you could talk to us a bit about how that idea came about and why you chose to operate the way you have.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because we keep hearing this as something interesting and different, but it didn't really occur to me at the time that it was anything particularly different, if I'm honest. But I mean, we're a very small organisation. We're 100 people. We don't have developers. We don't have the technical ability to do any of this work ourselves. We didn't have clear ideas of exactly where the opportunities were. We had use cases, right? We had our staff were involved in coming up with use cases where they thought that there could be value. And so instead of just, rolling the dice and picking one, we had to go through a process of procurement. We had to go through a process of setting a project up. And I was like, look, if we're going to do this, right, how much extra effort is it to, run the same process but just pick 5 of them? Well, the obvious problem was, that's going to cost more money. But what we decided to do was just pure R&D. And so what we did is we said, look, we've got $25,000 per use case. That's a fixed price. Surely there are some really interesting companies around New Zealand who would love to be given not a specification, but a user story. So we didn't spend time producing a big document of requirements. We had a single user story about what we thought the outcome was. And then we basically looked for companies who looked creative and innovative and were willing to spend, no more than $25,000 worth of their time to help us figure out, which of these might make sense. And we ended up with five proofs of concept, the POCs, for that amount of money. And I would say, and there's some vendors in the room, the people we worked with, we've got an amazing talent here in New Zealand, and they put in more effort than we paid for, if I'm quite honest. But I like to think that they got something from it, because part of the, the approach we set up right up front, is that we want all of this to be in the public domain. So all of the specs, all of the research reports, all of the code, it was built into our agreement that we could talk about it openly. We would share it. And that actually had one of the other benefits of it was an incredible way to communicate across government. You'd like to think that we've got better ways of talking to each other, but by simply putting this out in the open, that actually got a lot of attention and helped us, build on some of that with other collaborations. So I think it was just out of need, really, being a small organisation with limited budget. we just had to think, how can we do this differently?
Brilliant, thank you. Melissa, I wanted to ask you, who ultimately owned and led the project, and how have you worked with the IT team?
We're very much, as Andy described, we don't have a lot of the capability, we don't have this in-house. So the project was owned, ultimately we have an AI steering committee, and it was led out really by my colleague Jason, who's there, and myself really. And it was just a real joint business data kind of approach. And then we worked with Fintan to get that expertise around it. And I guess the biggest thing around it is where the decisions lay, which the decisions for what we had to do lay with us as Aero. And we were just really able to work and partner well to get the specifications that we needed and what the technology could do for us. Yeah.
And working with your IT team, have they been involved or?
They have, but more around how it interacts and engages with the rest of our technology, and particularly in the early days when we were anxious about all the privacy issues, what could come in, cybersecurity. So it was more around what we were doing wasn't going to break anything, and that it was going to stay within the rules that we were able to work within. And even just in the 18 months, I think somebody mentioned earlier, such a fast change around what's possible and what you can now actually use, and what you can do internally with the AI. Yeah, but certainly they kept us safe from that perspective. Yeah.
Raewyn, I'll ask the question and I'll hand you the mic. Interested at the beginning with the idea and kind of the decision about whether to go ahead or not. Was there any big sort of go or no go decision? What got the project over the line?
Well, we were very fortunate, I think, in that we had some funding available, and so we were looking for some good use cases around the business. The guidance area seemed like a really logical place to start, and the team were keen and enthusiastic. It's been very much kind of business led, IT, and we've built our agents kind of off-site premise data sing at the moment. We're looking at sort of bringing them into our own production environment. So certainly the IT team are getting involved now. But in many ways, I think with the business leading it, that's enabled us perhaps to go a bit faster, and perhaps to treat it more like, these are innovation projects and you need to kind of use innovation tools and methodology as opposed to don't apply the kind of methodology that the IT team might want you to sort of put you through if it's a $5 million big software build that's going to last you 5 to 10 years, because otherwise you'll still be here in 18 months' time. So just get going, I think.
And Jo, for someone else starting their agentic AI journey, what would be your top tip on where to start? And is there anything you would have done differently in retrospect?
It's probably a couple of things from our perspective. So I say don't boil the ocean. So continuous improvement over one big change. So look at where it can add value and start there. In terms of what we do differently, we spent a little bit of time playing with Copilot. And you heard some of the responses that we got where it couldn't pick up the complexity. So with some of what we were doing, it was a bit like an overeager grad. It would come back with a response. If there were 2 different answers, it would halve the answer. So for an example, if we said, how much can I spend when I'm travelling for work, and one SOP said $50 and one said 40, it would tell you it was 45. So we often found it was very keen to give us an answer, but not necessarily the right answer. So for us, research the technology early and proof of concept much faster.
All right, Andy. Governance and oversight. What's proved most useful day to day rather than perhaps on paper?
I mean, in our situation, we attached this work to existing governance systems. Again, we're a small organisation and we try and keep the overheads low. So instead of setting up, separate boards and separate projects, we, connected into things that were already operating. So I think that kept things really easy. But I think the biggest thing that made a difference, certainly we deal with information that is needs to be kept. It's very sensitive, and security is really, really important. So the biggest thing that made a difference is that when we first started doing the work, we worked with data and information that was already in the public domain. So we're not dealing with correspondence from the Attorney General. We're not dealing with conversations, with ministers or anything like that, or cabinet papers. We work with the stuff, the bills, the materials that are already out there. And then we work backwards, if you like. So we prove the case based on the material that was already there. And if it can work there, then it can work with sensitive materials that aren't already public. Now, if you're able to take an approach like that, then it just drastically simplifies the whole risk profile of the work you're doing. And the risk profile dictates what kind of governance and what kind of controls and stuff you need. So that's probably been the biggest thing that made a difference for us.
And just while you've got the mic, what's your, and I'm sure that Brendan and Josh won't mind if it's not theirs, have you got one POC that you're most excited about?
It's like choosing between your children. So look, we had 5 POCs. We've got one that's been taken forward at the moment into like a production stage. So the one that we're working on now is explanatory notes. Many of you will know what I'm talking about in the room, but basically the notes that explain to everyone what the legislation is supposed to do for people who are not actually going to read all the legislation. And for example, the work that Akama did with us on the plain language, that was an interesting result. We actually decided to pivot. We realised that the plain language guidance was helpful, but it turns out that there are other types of rules that are actually more important for checking, and we can't do everything. So we're working on pivoting that to a quality review tool. So these things take different paths.
Yeah. Brilliant, thank you. Joe, I wanted to ask you, what's next?
So we're currently building a brand new end-to-end digital platform for all of our regulatory services. And so while we've got some awesome AI tools, we put in 3 in the last 8 months, our next focus is really on how do we incorporate that into workflow, and where are the other things in workflow that we can use AI and automate, particularly around our what I call our low-value tasks. Through the work that we're doing, we see quite a big capability shifts from moving our people from doing process work into knowledge work. And so as we are building that end-to-end platform, how do we find those opportunities to continue to make those shifts?
I'll ask Melissa the next question. So we've heard a lot today about the importance of people and that this is about culture change and behaviour change. What are your observations about how your people in your organisation have engaged and responded to this?
That's a really interesting question. And I think some of the speakers earlier talking about roles leaving, people losing roles and things, obviously is really front of mind for a lot of our people, particularly in certain roles. So we've worked really hard to be really clear that it is human-centred. The sort of work we do, you have to have a human judgment over it. There's a whole lot of stuff that AI can help with, but we need a lot of, you need that human judgment, because making a call around how well a school is doing and what kind of support it needs is pretty high stakes. So there's key elements around that. There's a whole lot of things around human nature. Some of the comments I've kind of heard when we've been talking about it is, but it's cheating, isn't it? If you use that, it's kind of cheating. Or right through to, great, I can do this for everything. And so a lot of the work we're doing around our people capability and workforce strategy is picking up the sorts of baseline skills that our people will need into the future. We've got some changes happening that allow us to consider that in slightly different ways and how we can get efficiencies from that. But I think at the end of the day, we're an education agency. Many of our people come from the education sector, myself included. So people will always be first. It's just how you manage your way through that and provide people with the stepping stones through that change so they can see what it means for them and how it will make their life easier, and ultimately it's easy for us. We can demonstrate over time how it will make life easier for the young people out there. So that's the hook for our people.
I want to ask you a similar question, Raewyn, but I want to add something to it. And that's I don't know if you've got any colleagues in the room,
I
have. But I wondered about how people have responded, but also the leadership in the organisation. The other thing we've talked about a lot is the importance of leadership, and so I wanted to just ask you to comment on how the leadership in your organisation has been supporting these efforts, and what you've seen work, and maybe what could be better.
I mean, the leadership's been very supportive, and they've provided the funding and allowed us to get on with it, and to be honest, to get on with it in a reasonably autonomous way, because at the end of the day, it's just really about sort of having a go, working out whether we can do this, and how we use these agents to improve our work. We're now sort of embarking on a journey of, probably like many organisations, sort of getting our building blocks in place around AI in terms of, policies, the appropriate training for people, the more sort of ubiquitous, how do we roll, we have the tools rolled out across the organisation, but, where do we go next, and how do we develop from here? And I think, WorkSafe as an organisation put many of its leadership through some great AI training, which just really kind of got us up the curve as well in terms of, how to do some quite sophisticated prompting. Well, it was for me at the point that I sort of started, and to sort of get on that journey, but also, what are the building blocks an organisation needs around AI and the guardrails that you need in an organisation to keep yourself safe, and how do you need to be thinking about it from the strategic perspective in the organisation. So I think, that training has really sort of helped lift people's expectations. We've just sort of put out some little videos out on our intranet of what we've been doing, and certainly the ideas on use cases are starting to flood in, so there's plenty more to come.
And that's a great segue, and I'm going to ask each of you this, and I'll just ask it in order, which is, are you going fast enough as an organisation? And I'll leave it there.
I think we probably need to go faster. We've got some ideas on how to do our next developments and to enhance the tools that we've got. We've got 2 tools. We're looking at, can we actually hitch them together as well, and to get a bit more sophisticated. But I'm kind of conscious that we're probably well ahead of where the rest of the organisation is as well. So I think the organisation needs to go faster.
Yeah, I think our speed is appropriate for our, I guess, the objectives. Like, what we're not doing. This is not a, we're not working with these tools to engineer a complete transformation of our business processes. If we were doing that, we'd be starting with a blank sheet of paper, and we would be doing things very, very differently, and you'd be wanting to go at a different speed. What we're doing is we're looking at, it's a change process. One of the outcomes that we started with in terms of why we're doing this is actually to help the organisation start to plan out and move through this very changeable, what's about to hit us, or what is hitting us, right? And so from that point of view, we're not trying to, we're not working at breakneck speed, because we're trying to bring our people along with us. Our people are in the centre of our processes. Could we go faster? Absolutely. But we're also running a business. And so we have to pick our pace kind of carefully, I think. I guess until we're told otherwise, which is always a possibility.
That's a really good question. It's really 2 things that we think about, we've been thinking about in this space, but we could go faster, but we're also developing our new regulatory services on a brand new platform at the same time. So there's 2 questions that we're thinking about as we do that. So one is, where does human interaction matter the most? And thinking about that as we design our new services. And the second one is, how do we move faster while maintaining the trust of both our people and our customers? So those things are really top of mind. While we could move a bit faster than what we're doing, we've got to get the basic capability in place around our new digital platform first.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Particularly if you're a smaller organisation, and what we've learned, we've got a number of use cases, and particularly the one that I was referring to earlier. You need your subject matter experts, and in our case, our subject matter experts are the people out in the field, actually. So there's a real balance between how we manage things like our actual outputs, because that's kind of what we get paid to do, and then how we manage that across this innovation and making sure that we can. Ironically, being able to bring those people in probably would make their life easier over time. So we are really carefully managing the change. So I think, like everybody, the pace is probably about right. We've got significant other change that's happening in the organisation. We've had significant change. I think it's not just about the outputs. It's actually, you asked me about people. It's actually about making sure that people can cope with what they've got, and they can absorb the changes that are happening, and lots of things that they need to learn. So I think for us it's probably about right, and some of those use cases are going faster and some of them are going slower, but overall I think we're pretty comfortable with where we are, and it's been just great to hear where everybody else is, because you just don't know. So yeah, it's been a great opportunity.
Thank you everyone for coming along. This has been a fantastic event, and I hope you've got a lot out of it, and I think there's definitely appetite for more of these types of discussions moving forward. Some of the key points that I got as a takeaway is that energy and courage is needed. I don't think there's going to be the right or the perfect time to deploy AI or to use AI within your agency, so you need to have a bit of energy and courage to start. I think definitely learn by doing, otherwise you will get left behind. So again, the timing's never going to be quite right. And I think share and learn from each other. So all of you are on different journeys and have learnt mistakes and have learnt where the opportunities lie, and have learnt strategies for getting your executive on board or getting the funding right. So I think definitely learn and share from each other. And I think the final point is beware of the slop cannons. I think with AI, it's really easy to look like you're doing lots of really good work, but actually, if you look closer, there can be a lot of slop out there.